decision. I'll face the sunny side head on. I had a vision of what it might be like to reach the...
What's up, everybody? Welcome to our very special Thursday episode with special guests. And our special guest today is an old friend of ours, Matt Fondiler. I was going to say Matt the Porcelain Punisher.
Yeah, you almost did. And then you did anyway. That's okay. Hey, what's up, guys? Good to see you.
We miss you, Matt.
I
miss
know.
you. I have to say, I miss you personally because, we worked, he was Adam's assistant and I leaned on Matt for a lot of things, and you being gone is like a whole, took a long time for me to recover. But, yeah, I miss you. And I miss your smiling face at the studio and,
Yeah, it's been quite a change, I will say. It's hard to believe it's been almost 2 years. This April will be 2 full years.
Oh, my God.
Time kind of flies,
Wow.
But obviously I look back on my experiences with the whole Corolla crew very fondly, and it was a little weird starting over in Austin, but I have to say, like, my wife and I absolutely love it out here, and it's just been like, it was a big change, but it was a great change. I'm really happy that I did it. So.
Well, we're going to get into some really good, juicy stuff about what Matt's working on, because he's working on a lot of things that sound very interesting to Stefanie and I. But just briefly, like, how is Austin? I'm curious. Like, is it great? It's
wonderful. I mean, have either of you guys ever been here before?
No, but I really want to go.
Okay. So Austin, the downtown area is a big college town, and the very hip, lots of bars and restaurants and, busy nightlife. That's not necessarily what my wife and I are into. We like going out to bars and restaurants. We're not really hitting the clubs or anything. Yeah. But it's nice to have that kind of downtown area, and we're about 15 minutes south of downtown. And when you go north of downtown, it's a lot more built out, lots of buildings and construction zones. But in South Austin, that's where they have like the Keep Austin Weird. It's very much like Silver Lake or Echo Park, and just lots of, art community, very dog friendly, big, beautiful trees everywhere. Most of the bars and restaurants are just on these multi-acre, beautiful picnic areas. You can bring the dogs and let them run around. And, our property that we're still renting, but we moved to a place that's on a half acre with a creek in the back, and it's cheaper than what I had out there. Gas is like $2.50 out here.
Oh yeah.
So it's just the general cost of living is a lot lower. But like the personality of the city is very reminiscent of kind of what I left when I lived in Pasadena or Atwater Village. Like it doesn't really feel like what I thought Texas was going to feel like, but it's Austin,
Okay. Wow. That sounds great. I'm very happy for you. Very happy. Well, let's get into what we were talking about before we went on air about the shows that you're producing, that you're doing.
Yeah. Can you tell us too, how when you first got there, were you going to produce podcasts? What were you looking to do?
I mean, I just assumed that I would continue producing podcasts just because I did that for Adam for what ended up being 12 years.
Wow.
And there's a few podcast networks out here, and I just sort of felt like I'm fucking hot shit. It isn't going to want to hire me. And that was not the reality. I just really had a hard time finding anything, to be totally honest.
Is it competitive, the podcasting market?
I think that it is. Certainly if you're in my position where you just are like an organized person who has good interpersonal relationships, that is apparently not as hard to find as I thought it might be. But, Kaylin can attest to this too. We have a certain set of knowledge of, engineering and editing, and that kind of comes in handy. But my experience has been people want to know if you're like a video editor. And I did a little bit of video editing in high school and college, but I'm basically an audio guy. Right. And so it's been a bit of a learning curve for me to learn how to do video content. Even I'm sure your guys' show has a video component to it. So I think that was sort of the skill that I was lacking in a little bit. But I have been schmoozing quite a bit over the last year. I didn't tell you guys this off air, but I got a gig. I actually just wrapped working as a story producer on a documentary about this stand-up comedian named Matt Rife, who's been in the headlines lately.
Yes, he has.
So this production company out here, I've been trying to work for them for like a year. And the guy who runs this company finally got this project with a comedian and asked if I wanted to come on board and basically help them figure out the story that was within all of the footage that they captured. And that to me ended up being like a dream job. I loved every minute of it. And it's really close to what I do for the true crime stuff, which is kind of just becoming an expert on a particular story and just consuming as much material as I can and then trying to like tell that story.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Is it a Matt Rife puff piece?
You know, it probably would be a little bit just because he's on top of the world right now and he has a sold out world tour for the next several years. So the whole idea would be kind of following him as he's, you know, on his rise.
But is the backlash going to be included?
I think so. Yeah. We definitely were incorporating that because it's all, you know, real reactions to what's happening too.
Yeah. So it's a documentary on him.
Yeah. And to kind of to circle back to what you were saying, so that came like within the last few months, but pretty much for the last year, I just leaned on my creative writing. I did a lot of Sword and Scale episodes, and I ended up through connection that we all know and love, Gary Smith, through him, got put in touch with a couple of defense attorneys that were looking to start their own podcast. And I kind of became their producer. So the last year I've been, you know, producing the true crime shows, producing the lawyer show, me and Kaylin and Gary and Chris and Dawson, we also do the Watercolor 2 to 3 times a week. And then this other Follow Doc project. It's been a lot. But
I'm so happy for you, Matt. I'm so happy for you. Aww.
You're so busy.
Yeah. But so tell us about the true crime podcast.
The lawyer one.
Yes.
The lawyer one. Yeah. Okay. So this wonderful attorney on the West Coast, her name is Sarah Azari. She is a criminal defense attorney, and she started following, like everybody, the Alex Murdaugh case, which sort of gripped the nation. She reached out to one of the attorneys who represents Alec, and he lives in South Carolina. And I'm here in Austin, and basically they're on multiple coasts, and I just produced the show remotely, and the show's called The Presumption. And it's all about, you know, the presumption of innocence. And we now live in a world where as soon as you read the headlines, you're already starting to make up your mind about whether or not this person is guilty. And their argument is that oftentimes by the time the trial starts, everybody is in the assumption of guilt, not the presumption of innocence. And so it is a legal analysis podcast. They interview other defense attorneys, people that are kind of involved in the sort of peripheries of criminal prosecution. We did an episode about lie detectors with an expert, about cell phone towers, DNA, and they look at it from a defense point of view, trying to kind of pick apart what the public what you would think is the reality about, say, a lie detector and how you can beat a lie detector and what's the reality of being able to do that.
And
then
what do you think?
I thought for sure beating a lie detector would be possible. Like I heard you just squeeze your butt, you know, squeeze your butt, you can pass the test. Oh, I've heard that. But I found out that they actually have a butt pad sensor that you sit on. It will measure if you squeeze your butt.
Oh my God.
So that's out. That is out.
That I've never heard.
Okay, but I have a friend, an actual friend who decided to be a cop after years of maybe living a different kind of life, decided to be a cop, had to and did pass the lie detector test and had to.
Really?
Yeah, and he said he just like slowed his breathing. He like mind over matter, and he passed the light. And
so what?
I mean, as far as I could tell, mind over matter would be the only way to do it, because the way that this guy described it is that these tests are measuring the this is my version of what he said, but they're measuring like the synapses going off in your brain before you've even said the word. So if I say the word horse, you just think of a horse in your head, and it kind of works like that. So even if you think that you're saying it, if you've already thought it, it's too late.
Oh.
And the whole
interesting.
idea of taking your time and slowly responding, slowly slowing your breathing, it doesn't work like that. There's timers. You have to answer in a set amount of time.
Wow.
So,
but people have passed lie detector tests and then been proven guilty, like by DNA. So, I mean, that's why they're not,
admissible in court.
Yeah, thank you for the word admissible.
Why aren't they admissible in court?
None of this is an exact science. That's the problem.
Yeah, it's all crazy.
Right.
And now
What
they
about
have
DNA?
like genetic genealogy.
Yeah,
where they'll like be able to find you out from your distant relative.
Your stupid distant relatives that went on fucking 23andMe. Like, didn't they understand there was a murderer in the family that needs to remain anonymous? My God.
Right. Have some decency.
What else have you found? Yeah, like that's been interesting. That like I'm sure you've gotten some like DNA stuff, or
do they try to? How do they fight the DNA? These defense attorneys.
These damn defense attorneys. Again, I think it's really about just trying to prove that it's not an exact science, and trying to think, just because they have something called, I think it's called contact DNA or touch DNA. There's a big case happening right now about Brian Kohberger. Don't know if you guys have heard of that.
Yes.
Oh, the Idaho guy?
The
Idaho guy. And there's, like a knife sheath.
Yes.
The knife holder was found under the person's body.
Right.
And it contained DNA from
on
Brian
the snap,
Kohberger.
right? On the snap of the sheath.
But one could argue that you could have that rubbed up against their clothing, or they touched something that somebody else touched before then. And there's just ways to transfer it that it doesn't 100% mean that it was yours. And that's sort of, at least my observations, they're trying to create a reasonable doubt.
Right.
The whole idea is to just, let you know that it's not 100%. And if it's not 100%, maybe you should go the other way on your decision.
Right.
But usually not, because usually there's a whole bunch of things that line up, right? That they try to go. I was listening to, of course, like a Dateline or something that was the defense attorneys were trying to argue the cell phone tower evidence and saying, well, it's not an exact science, and, trying to get somebody to admit that just because the cell phone tower doesn't mean that you were necessarily there. But of course, in the case, there were several cell phone towers. For several places, it was like the place where the murder happened, and then the place where he buried the body, and the where he something happened with a dog, and it was like, so okay, maybe if it all relied on one cell tower, but then when you're talking about three, that would be the biggest coincidence.
Yeah.
But the defense always tries to go, there's coincidences happen.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. And in the defense world, they go, that's a bad fact. They just call that a bad fact.
Oh, really?
Which I don't even quite get what that's supposed to mean, but that sounds pretty bad to me. That's for sure.
Do you ever just roll your eyes at that stuff?
No, I don't. No, because honestly, I believe in the mission of the show, which is to ultimately kind of preserve the justice system. And if you are convicted, or if you are accused of a crime, you would want a fair trial.
Yeah.
And it is kind of crazy. I mean, it's obviously harder and harder to find an impartial jury, people who've never heard any of the facts of the case. It's really hard to do that these days, especially with the internet and things like that. But it's kind of bullshit if 6 people have already made up their mind before they've even looked at the paperwork of the case.
Right.
That's the part to me that I can get behind and understand. Again, I write a ton of stories about horrible people who do the worst things imaginable, and they deserve to fucking rot in hell. Sorry if we're not allowed to cuss.
No, you can cuss.
Have you met us, Matt?
Yeah, I produced the show. I produced episodes of the show. I know. So I am in no way a pro defendant kind of person. But I do think that a lot of times we make a lot of assumptions, and it's not fair if it's in the matter of the courts. You know, that should not come into play.
Do you ever think, though, and I mean, this is the most obvious question ever, but do you ever think some of these criminals that it's pretty much proven, let's just say they admit to it, and it's just a heinous crime, and it's not just a false confession, but it's something that they actually really knew the facts of the case or whatever, and then there's DNA or whatever. do you ever feel like, and let's just say it's a horrible crime against murdering children or babies, you know, and then you get the defense that's like really trying to poke holes and trying to find any way to defend this person. Do you ever just feel like, how does that person sleep at night knowing that there's a chance they could get somebody out that will for sure go do something? You know what I mean? Like a serial killer, like somebody has to defend that person.
Yeah.
And when it's really obvious that they did it, but they still have to mount a defense. Do you ever feel like, God, that's got to be the hardest job ever?
I mean, it's definitely a very difficult job, and they get a horrible reputation for that reason. I mean, even my dad is an attorney. He started as a defense attorney, and he, over time, became a plaintiff's attorney because he had a really hard time, like, looking himself in the mirror when he was a defense attorney. Like, just feeling like he screwed over people who didn't need to have that happen to them. And so I can definitely see that side of it. But again, and what you're talking about, where it's like the person has obviously done it and they're just putting everybody through this, making them relive it. Yeah. That is the worst of the worst. But I would say that the core of the defense attorney's job is a little bit on the other side of the scale, which is more like sort of a disenfranchised person who, you know, they've had a really hard time in life and maybe they did do something terrible, but like they deserve a chance to try to get out, you know, even if it was something terrible, like, you know, I don't know. It's kind of hard to put it into words. That's, I guess, part of what's fascinating about the whole topic in general. While we all like these crime stories, there is a little bit of a gray area sometimes.
Let's take a quick break and then we'll come back and see if you have any specific cases to tell us about.
All right, we're back. Boy, so much to talk about. I love this stuff.
Were there any cases that they covered that you were like, thought one way, but then hearing the defense attorneys talk, you were like, oh, maybe I was wrong?
I'd have to get back to you on that one.
Alex Murdaugh?
Well, let me ask you about, I want to ask you about, I'm fascinated.
I mean, let me be clear. I do not know anything other than what everybody else who just watches TV and watches the docuseries and things like that. Now, I have zero insider information, even though this guy is a host of the show. But it's not like I'm getting a deep dive or learning anything at all.
But that we were talking about, like, Alex Murdaugh, for instance, you know, his trial was in, like, the hometown of how do you get a fair, let's say, like obviously he did do it, you know, Bubba, you know, it's chicken, you know, but like, let's say that didn't happen. Let's say he could have been innocent, like, but yet he looked really guilty. Like, how come they had the trial there? And that I wondered that.
I don't know if you're aware of that. This is still ongoing. The trial, even though it's ended, there is a whole thing happening right now about tampering with the jury. And was it a fair trial? Right. And that was one of the big arguments is like, how do you find 12 people who don't know this story, especially when it's in the hometown and involves one of the most influential figures of that town. Like, of course, everybody knows about it.
And also, there's been a lot of documentaries about it. Yes. Like, how do you find someone who doesn't have Netflix?
So what is the deal with that?
That's what the defense is kind of arguing.
Right.
They're like that it's bullshit. And in this particular case, the head of the jury, like the clerk of the court, who, you know, you could say is almost like a den mother to the jurors, like trying to brings them in and out. And apparently, according to like documents that were filed, she made up her mind that he did it and was kind of the whole time just being like, all right, people, we all know that he did it. Let's just get up and get home. And, you know, whether or not people believed this woman, they still heard what she had to say.
Right.
And it's all influencing the decision that's being made.
Right. So now his defense,
they're arguing for like a retrial, basically. But again, the same thing's going to pop up. Like, how do you retry this case when even more people now know this case? Like, I didn't know the story until recently, you know?
Yeah. Wow.
I feel responsible because I personally like discussed it with quite a few people.
You're sending them back.
But you know, Kaylin also had me prepare some of the true crime stories that I've worked on.
Yeah, tell us.
Tell you guys a little bit about, you
Please.
know. And actually, I will say that this first one that I'll tease a little bit is the season premiere of this year's Sword and Scale show. So if you have Sword and Scale Plus, the episode just came out on Sunday. And if you are on the main feed, it comes out this Sunday. And this was a story that I found to be pretty interesting, which is to say that, you know, when people get old, we just expect that old people are going to die one day. And especially if it happens in like a retirement community, somebody coming home with their groceries and then being found on the floor of their kitchen with no visible injuries to them and some groceries that are just sitting on the countertop. Everybody just assumes that that old woman had a heart attack or died like any other kind of senior citizen would go.
Sure.
And this story that I dove into deals with that exact opening, except that the children noticed in the days that followed that jewelry was missing from their mom/grandmother's apartment, including her wedding ring. And over the course of a couple months, a couple other elderly women were found dead and again assumed to be of natural causes. And it wasn't until another woman was attacked by a guy pretending to be like a compassionate care worker, tried to smother her with a pillow.
Oh my God.
He survived. And essentially they tried to catch up to this mysterious man. And as the story unfolds, you find out that he has been doing this for a very long time.
Wow.
A lot of elderly women who were all killed by this guy.
Wow.
And
That's diabolical. Like,
really, really creepy stuff.
I mean, I gotta hand it to him. It's pretty smart. Like, I'm not like taking sides here or anything.
Lynette takes out.
You know,
of it.
like, no, but it makes sense. Like, don't attack the young, vibrant mom that's at home alone and going for a jog. You know, because then it's gonna catch up to you. Go for the elderly that do it in a.
The old ticker's got to go sometime.
Yeah. 1 foot in the grave.
They actually have like footage from the Walmart parking lot, and this dude would just sit in his car and just park his car with a view of the handicap spots.
Wow.
And he'd like follow them in and like, oh ma'am, let me help you with the cart. Oh, let me help you. And you could just watch this guy just in the background, just silently following these women all over Walmart. It really makes you think like that
creepy.
could be me, you know?
Yes.
It's terrifying.
But he didn't try to kill them at Walmart. He what did he do?
them
Follow them back
them
to
home.
their follow them
back home.
Wow.
And then try to smother them with a pillow.
So to people's house, to their house, or to like retirement
nursing
homes.
So nursing homes. So there's a whole other layer to the story of people who work in these retirement communities that see this guy loitering around and they don't do anything about it because they just aren't thinking that he's really a danger.
Of course.
They're thinking, oh, how nice. Gladys has a visitor. She hasn't had many visitors.
That's
all right. So that's this newest Sword and Scale.
So
that's
Matt, I have
out.
a question. So when you're looking for these stories, you want to find the stories that have good audio, like have the audio from the interrogation. Is that always like you look for, or video? So it's not just a story. It's got the you can hear the interrogation. Yeah.
That's sort of the hook of Sword and Scale, is that, you know, we fill out the Freedom of Information Act requests and we actually track and get the audio from the stories themselves. But there is another variation of the show that recently came out called Sword and Scale Nightmares. And rather than being hour-long episodes with all of the audio, they're half-hour episodes, and it's just narration. It's just the story. So what that means is that now I can do cases that don't have incredible audio.
See. Okay.
Just crazy stories from really any point in time, which is a good transition for another story that I'd like to tell you guys.
Yes, please tell us.
Tell us.
So
we're delighted.
This is an episode of Sword and Scale.
This is a dream come true for me and Lynette.
What are you doing next Monday?
This is so old school for us.
Yes. Okay, go, Matt, go.
Okay, so this is on the Sword and Scale Nightmares feed. This is one of it's weird to say my favorite episodes because it's such a fucked up story, but it's a good one.
Yeah.
Let me just cut
the episode
real here and
What's
say
that?
that Matt does does these all the time. And on the water cooler, he's always like kind of talking about his cases, and he gets so excited over these like horrible, horrific nightmare cases, and his face gets all giddy. We always make fun of him for like, Jesus, Matt, calm down. There's a bunch of dead people.
I know. I remember specifically talking to you at the warehouse like years ago, and I'm like, I need something to listen to, and you were like, do you like true crime? And I was like, yes. I was like, done and done. And that's what started me on the true crime like podcast, because there's so many other good ones. Okay, so go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, speaking of the show that we do with Kalen, you know, he has a pond cleaning business, but there have been casualties, and he therefore has his own segment called Sword and Scales. And it's about some really nasty fish murders. You don't even want to know.
Kalen, you tell us about
I think there's been one or two FCO Patreon episodes where I've detailed the various investigations that have gone on in my pond work.
Fish homicide. Yeah.
All right, so this is Sword and Scale Nightmares story. It's called Going for a Spin. And this is going back to the 70s. All right, 1976.
That's up in my alley.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, as the country was celebrating its bicentennial, a bunch of people got together and made a thousands of mile long bicycle path. And it was called Bike Centennial 76. It was a very successful event. People riding on their bikes from Oregon to Boston or something on the opposite coast.
I kind of remember that. Where was the bike? How did the bike trail go? Was from what state to?
It started in Oregon. I honestly can't remember which one it goes to, because the people in the story don't get very far.
Okay. Oh, God.
Shit.
But essentially, 1976, big successful year. There was a guidebook, and in 1977, these two college sorority sisters, I don't know if they were in a sorority together, but these two friends from college, they decide with limited experience that they are going to take this bicycle trip together. It's months long, camping, you know, but you're getting to see nature. You go through 10 different states, and it was just sort of like this romantic idea to just have the open road ahead of you. So these two like 19-year-old girls, they're on this path starting in Oregon. They're going to go east, and they meet up with this married couple who are clearly like much more experienced bikers than they are. And after about a week, it's obvious that the two girls are holding this couple back. So the married couple says, listen, we're just going to go separate ways. They go 20 miles, and the two girls have their little guidebook, and they see that about 15 miles, which is a lot easier for them to do, there is an overnight park called Klein Falls State Park. And they take the trek to Klein Falls State Park, and when they get there, they find out that it's for day use only. You're not supposed to spend the night there. Their guidebook was wrong. But now it's too late, and it's getting dark.
Yeah.
And so the two of them decide to set up a tent and stay the night by this river. And in the middle of the night, a truck comes burning into their tent, pins down one of the two girls. She, while she's pinned under this truck, hears her friend and this like thumping, nasty, gashing sound. And the woman who's pinned under the truck suddenly feels relief as the truck is moved away from her. And then she hears the footsteps of a guy approaching, and he stands over her with an axe in his hands. And she cannot remember his face. All she can remember was that he was a handsome cowboy. And she begs for her life, and he walks away and lets her live. She goes up to her friend who's been struck in the head several times with an axe. But miraculously, another car has come into the day park campsite and manages to get the two of them to a hospital. The woman who was struck in the head makes it through, but she has no memory of what happened. And the woman who was pinned by the car, who begged for her life, she remembers everything except for who did it, what this guy actually looked like. And a like 5'6" child molester kind of guy who's in prison admits to the crime, but it is not the guy that she remembers. She remembers like a handsome cowboy.
Okay.
Now, this case is never prosecuted. Cold case. No suspects. No clues. Nothing. this woman.
By the way, imagine your memory of somebody who just like tried to murder your friend and you is that he's handsome.
Yeah. Was he wearing
Right?
I mean,
was he wearing a cowboy?
he wasn't half bad looking.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay,
go on.
so
Sorry.
15 years go by. And this woman has been battling some like psychological issues, as you can imagine. And she decides that she's going to go back to Oregon and solve the case herself. And she wrote an incredible memoir where she basically does just that. And I essentially adapted her book into the episode of the Sword and Scale Night.
Wow, that's great. So they found the guy?
I want to kind of tease it a little bit so that I don't give away necessarily everything, but I will say that it is a somewhat satisfying ending in that it kind of goes back to what we're all talking about, which is it really does seem like that's the guy, that they did find the guy, but there's also parts of the whole case that you just kind of never know. But it's truly like a real life, campfire, axe murderer in the woods kind of ghost story, but it's a real story.
That's
and
crazy
it's
story.
An incredible story of like survival of this one woman too.
I'm going to ask you guys a question. Why do you think it is like this is just never the other way around? There are never like, a guy decides to like go on a hike by himself and just gets murdered by some random woman with an axe. Like it just doesn't, it's always women alone. Like what is that bloodthirst that men have to go and like rape and murder women the second they're alone? Like it's crazy to me that there are so many bad men that women can't be in a stairwell alone. Like if you're just walking down the street alone at night, like you're game for
gotta learn
some guy
self-defense.
to rape and murder you. But like, it scares me that you can't think about that no woman would ever go camping by herself or with a girlfriend somewhere remote by themselves because for fear, not of like being killed by a bear, but of some guy going, oh, good, women alone. Let me rape and kill them. Like, why is that?
I don't know. And actually, there is another point of the story early on when the two girls, before they went on the bike ride, they're just like practicing doing a bike ride somewhere else. And they had set up their tent. And at the campsite, there was like a creepy dude who was just kind of making like dick jokes and being a little bit like too uncomfortably flirty with them. And one of the girls had this idea that we should turn the tent around so that you would think the opening of the tent would be facing the river or facing the rest of the campers, but we're going to put the opening on the other side. And sure enough, that night, while they were falling asleep, they saw handprints on the side of their tent where the zipper would normally be of this dude trying to get into their tent.
Oh my God. These girls have bad luck at campsites.
Yeah,
it's
really,
horrible.
seriously.
It's not bad luck. It's bad men.
That's crazy.
I know. But I think, obviously
for
like
men,
a size and strength thing. It's, it's fucked up. It's really fucked up.
But just
plenty of
sad
true crime stories with crazy women, but not not in the same way.
But the women, all like every episode of Snapped or whatever, women kill their husbands. They kill, their lovers, their rival for their lover,
the other woman.
They kill family members. They kill their, brother. I mean, their abusive uncle, but women are not. There aren't sexual crimes where they're just randomly going and trying to attack a guy and have sex with him.
Yeah. Well, let's take a break, and let's get back to some other stories.
On that note,
all right, we're back.
This is the best time ever.
I know.
Do you have another one?
I know, Matt.
Do you have one more?
Well, just really quickly, I wanted to ask Matt, like, where did you find that? You said she wrote a book. Are you like, is that just research? Oh, here's a true crime book. Did you read the book? Did you then look into like if that story had been told? Like, how exactly does that develop into an episode?
Yeah.
Great question. I generally am looking I start with just a kernel of an idea, and then I want to see if there is a story that's kind of like that. So, for example, this is a story. I remember when I was a kid, this is a quick side note. When I was a little kid, my family and I went to Yosemite. And when we got there, I went to the hotel, I turned on the TV, and there was a news flash about an axe murderer that just murdered a scientist living in Yosemite. And that night, my dad, not really knowing or giving a shit, was like, let's take a walk around the campground, let's walk around the hotel at nighttime. And I was like having a fucking heart attack. So that has always stayed with me. Now, that story has been covered. I ended up finding, I was going to cover it, and then I saw that there's like a Hulu docuseries that's about that case. But when I was typing in axe murder, campsite, I stumbled across this other story, and I just saw like a little headline about what's called the Klein Falls axe attack. And I was like, oh, that sounds kind of interesting. And so from there, I like Wikipedia, Google search that, and then eventually found, oh, this woman wrote a book about it. And then it just kind of goes from there. Some of the sword and scale ones where you need the audio, I'm honestly just looking at YouTube for cases that are online that have audio. That's usually like a good starting point.
What did you put in your Google search? I'm just like,
oh my God,
there's
my
an
Google
FBI
search
van
is
sitting outside of Matt's house right now.
I know.
My Google search is insane. It really is. I mean, it just depends. Like I said, like axe murder or campsite, that would definitely be one. I wanted to do a story about like an exorcism. I feel like there's got to be like murders that involve exorcism. There's a really famous one that they turn into a movie, but I found a truly horrifying story about a priest who killed a baby because he was trying to perform an exorcism.
Oh my God.
And it's so messed up, but then my Google search becomes all about the details of that case to try to find reliable news sources and contacts.
Wow.
So anyway, Kaylin, I don't know if that answers your question.
What's your algorithm like? Like, what kind of videos are popping up on yours? Is it all like true crime, little shorts and stuff like that?
In fact, you may recall on an episode of Watercolor, I tried to share some video on YouTube, and you guys all saw like similar videos or videos I've been looking at on the right hand side, and it was disturbing.
Yeah. What about
it's
like
a lot of
like pedophile and stuff like that too? Like you know.
I mean, occasionally I have covered stories like that. I mean, to me, obviously, we're looking for stories that are about the darkest parts of humanity, but my interests are more in the kind of slasher horror movie adjacent kind of stories. You know, some of the other writers can really get into like the true horrors of, you know, interpersonal relationships and things like that, which I've done some stories like that, but
Matt, you're too nice for that kind of stuff. You want to keep it more slasher, more axe murdery. Yeah, I get it.
I got to compartmentalize a little bit.
Yes.
I become like a temporary expert. Like as I've been retelling you these stories today, like I've got a bunch of notes in front of me. Like I had to go back and read what I wrote because once I've turned in an episode, I want that shit out of my head, man.
How long?
It's funny that you say that because way back in the day, I remember filling in for you on like doing a sword and scale, covering some case, and you were like, you were out of town, something. Hey, can you just look up the details of this and kind of host this episode? And I remember it was a case that they kind of made a horror movie about called Don't Breathe, where like these teenagers break into this guy's house and they go into his basement and then he kills them.
That's the famous one.
Yeah. And then I just remember, and there's literally audio of this guy like killing these teenagers in his basement. I can remember it to this day. It's so horrible.
Steph knows that episode.
It's just one.
We've covered that on Rewind.
That's crazy.
That one still gives me chills, like just thinking about that one episode.
That's the castle defense or whatever.
That's right. Stand your ground.
Stand your ground.
That's some good castle.
So,
yes.
So let me do one more for you guys.
Yes.
And this is one that has not come out yet. I've turned it in. It's probably going to come out later in the summer or something. I don't know. There's a bunch of great episodes. So
in the summer,
my goal for this,
it's only January.
I was trying to. The show's been plotted out. He's got a lot of really talented
just
writers.
real quick, how long does it take to do one story?
I mean, it takes me a couple months of work, There's probably 40 to 60 hours of research before I even start outlining.
Wow.
I will say it used to take me a little bit longer because I used to, when I would help build the episodes out, I would do a lot of like music and things like that. But the process behind the scenes has changed a little bit. It's a little easier to kind of submit stories without having to do a bunch of post-production work on them. But I would say I checked, I'm averaging about 5 stories a year, which is not prolific compared to some of the other people who do this work.
Does that include the nightmare ones too, though?
Yeah, that includes those, and those are a little bit shorter, not as much research ahead of time. Some of the ones with like the big trials, I have to watch every second of the trial to try to see what to me is actually important to the story and how to really tell it.
Wow.
Anyway,
okay.
let me share one more.
Yes.
Let me choose one more for you guys.
Yes. Okay.
My goal for this story was to do what Jaws did for the ocean. I wanted to do that for ride sharing services like Uber and Lyft.
Oh my God. Keep in mind we have teenagers that take ride share.
Well,
Okay.
again,
Not for
I'll
long.
just tease a little bit. I'll
Okay,
just
no,
tease.
go ahead.
No,
Tell
tell
us.
So this is a story from actually just a couple years ago, 2019, in downtown Columbia, South Carolina, a really famous bar district called Five Points, sort of like, I don't know, Sunset Boulevard or something. It's just like a lot of stuff happening down there. And these college girls are celebrating the end of their senior year, about to, have the greatest time of their life. And this girl, her name is Samantha Josephson, she was out partying with her friends. She wanted her boyfriend to come and visit, but he was going to be visiting the following weekend. It was a long distance relationship. And so he's like, I'm not going to be able to come out tonight, but you should go out and have a good time with your friends. And she's got a lot on her mind, some personal things with her family. And ultimately she decides she is going to go home for the night. And so she calls her boyfriend as she's waiting for an Uber. And she finally sees the car that's supposed to take her home. She gets into the car. She's hung up with her boyfriend by now. And on security camera, the car drives away. And this is the last time that this girl is ever seen again, because it turns out it was not an Uber driver. It was a guy kind of stalking the downtown area and saw a confused girl.
Yeah.
And he was so excited that his car literally jumps the curb as it's careening into the parking spot in front of her. But she's so distracted that she just gets into the car. And he had child safety locks that prevented her from even rolling the windows down. And I don't want to say what happened to her, but it's not good. Let's just say that. And this guy is so guilty, so guilty, but the security footage only captured the car, and you could not tell who was driving the car. And so, bringing this all full circle to the beginning of our conversation today, the defense in this particular case is fascinating as they try to explain how somebody dressed like our guy, wearing his clothing, took his car and committed this act and brought the car back to him. And there's no way that it could be our guy. And like we were saying at the beginning, just somebody who's so obviously guilty, forcing everybody to relive this because they are just claiming innocence in the face of complete absurdity. So anyway,
And is this
story.
a case that started the Say My Name law?
That is correct.
Yeah.
That is the very one. Exactly. What's my name?
What's my name?
Which is
Yeah.
what the family of the victim essentially said, like, before you get into a car,
Yes.
you just need to ask, what's my name? And they should be able to know your name. Otherwise, it's not your driver.
Right.
And they're also responsible. You'll notice now that ride sharing services have big light up displays of the Uber logo or the Lyft logo. And that's another part of the legislation that this family, unfortunately, had to try to bring to light.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember that. It was a horrible story. But
Yeah,
that guy's
so
in
that
jail,
one-
right?
What's that?
That guy's in jail, right?
Yeah, he's in jail.
Yeah.
He is in jail.
So,
But if you are not familiar with it, later this summer, it'll be a sword and scale. And,
awesome. Wow.
be real
Matt,
careful with this ride shares.
I'm so proud of you. I'm like,
You're doing the Lord's work.
yes, you are.
Thank you. Yes, researching serial killers is most certainly what the Lord intended.
Right.
And how's the wife?
She's doing great. She's a production accountant on The Bachelor and The Bachelorette.
Oh, she
That's
is?
Yeah, she's been doing that for a long time now. So
Oh,
she's doing real
awesome.
well. We got a puppy about a year ago when the dog was 10 weeks old. So now she's 1 year old. And
What kind
that
of dog?
has been, it's like a collie cattle mix. We're not
Nice.
exactly sure.
Yeah.
But she's like 35, 40 pounds. Her name's Tiki.
Oh, Tiki.
And
so cute.
yeah, and we still have Taco. So we got Tiki and Taco.
Tiki and Taco. That's so cute.
Yeah, so we've just been, taking her to dog training classes, and there's a really cool off-leash dog park that we go to with her all the time. And that's honestly been like a bulk of my days when I'm not writing or working, is just trying to keep this little 1-year-old ball of energy under control.
So cute. Oh, Matt, I'm so proud of you, and I'm so happy for you.
Thank you for coming today.
Yes, please, and come again soon. And we love talking to you.
Great.
Yeah.
And when does the episodes what's the schedule of which show episodes
They're all just kind of random. So the Presumption, that show drops every Tuesday, and I am on air for that show as well, if you like the sound of my voice. Also, as mentioned, the Watercolor, me and my boys, my cruel digital buds, we've been doing that for over a decade at this point.
Crazy.
Wow.
That's twice a week, not necessarily the same days every week, but generally like Tuesday, Thursday, we do movie nights and things like that as well.
People
and then
love
lastly,
that show.
Sword and Scale and Sword and Scale Nightmares. That's pretty periodical. They're like once every 2 weeks, pretty much, unless you're a premium member, and then it's every week. But like I said, there's a number of mine. I got about 25 stories that are out there for people to check out.
Nice.
And,
How do they know if it's your story? Does it say it in like the show description?
They don't.
Oh, okay.
No,
there's just no way. But if you follow Matt on Facebook, don't you post?
Yeah, follow me on Twitter. I put out from time to time. People ask me, and I'll tweet out like episode numbers and things like that for people who want to hear. So I'm also on Twitter, or X rather.
Yes.
At Matt Fondiler.
Oh, Matt, thank you so much.
We love
you so much, and
I love you guys
please,
too. This is awesome.
Please come again and give my love to the wife and to the puppies.
I absolutely will.
All right, thanks, Matt.
Bye,
We
Matt.
Love you.
Take care, guys.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. All right, check out Watercolor.